Fantastic. Thanks, Mai.
Great. Thanks, Tennille. So hi, my name's May. So I'm a clinical psychologist and I work at Peter Mac as a project manager on our Fearless project. So this is a project we've been running looking at fear of cancer recurrence. And so that's partly what we'll be talking about today, as Tennille mentioned, the fear of cancer recurrence and some tools and strategies for managing that fear when it comes up. So thank you all for joining today. And just in light of the recording, Tennille, I was going to ask for input throughout the presentation, but I guess if I'll leave some space for that to happen, but if no one's comfortable to say anything with the recording, knowing that it's going to be sort of shared online, that's okay as well. But I will leave some gaps there if anyone would like to share.
I can also monitor the chat as well for you, May. So if anyone can't use their microphone for some reason, use the little chat function and I can read it out for you.
Great, thanks, Tennille. So I might share my screen. So give me 1 second. So hopefully you can all see that now.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, great. So just to give you a little bit of an outline for today, I'll run through sort of how we define fear of cancer recurrence, the impact of fear of cancer recurrence, or FCR for short, that people tend to report, and then run through some tools to help you manage FCR. So I guess as a starting point, when we think about treatment, there is a sense, or there's an idea that once it's over, I'm supposed to be positive, things return to normal, whether that's from ourselves or maybe from the people around us. That can be a common sort of theme that crops up, but I guess it's not always feasible, because cancers, as you know, can come with all these different impacts that happen after, as well, throughout the journey from diagnosis and treatment, and after treatment as well, that can leave long-lasting effects physically. So body changes, changes to your sense of identity, your social and relationships. And a common theme that comes up is that treatment actually provides a bit of a structure or a routine for some people, and once that ends, it can sort of feel almost like a loss, or a bit of almost an abandonment, that suddenly there's no more of these structured appointments, and that can start to lead to different thoughts or questions coming up. For example, some common ones might be, has the treatment worked? What does worked mean? And how do I know that it's worked? Questions around, does this mean I'm cured? What if the cancer comes back, which is the topic of today? And then if it comes back, what will happen? So these questions start to crop up at this point. So in the research, the fear of cancer recurrence is defined as the fear or worry that cancer could return or progress, either in the same place or in another part of the body. And while this is kind of this broad definition, when we speak to people, we see that this fear can take very different forms depending on the person. So it can cover things like fear of death, fear of further treatments or pain and suffering. And the other things might be fear of how this would impact family, work and other obligations, and different goals or sort of life plans that this worry can start to be focused on. So we can see here a quote from a previous study. So this person, when I look at my daughter, I feel I'm not allowed to get sick because she needs me. So there's this kind of worry about the loved ones. And so I might take a pause here for a moment, just to give you a chance to maybe think about whether some of these fears come up for you, and if anyone's feeling comfortable to share, then I'll give you a moment for that.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it feels like you hit the nail on the head, especially on that first slide when I was talking about, all those things that come up, and the changes and stuff. So I definitely relate to all of this.
Mm. Yeah, and it can feel like a lot because there's all these changes that are happening, and it can be quite overwhelming as well.
Yeah, and particularly when you said it's like when you had treatment, it was like this very regimented thing, and the number one priority was your health, and then it's over, and you got this huge void in your life, and it's like, do I just go back to normal, or it's a big adjustment.
Yeah, definitely, and so for some people, your outlook on life can change as well after treatment. So then there's a question of where to next. If my previous lifestyle doesn't work anymore, like what's the next step? So these are really big questions. Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing, Paul. Did anyone else feel comfortable to share any of your thoughts? Right, move along. So in terms of how common FCR is, we see that, I guess we think of the sphere of recurrence as pretty normal, really, where up to 97% of people have reported some degree of this sphere of recurrence. So we would generally expect that most people who go through the cancer and treatment will have some level of kind of these thoughts in the back of their mind that what if it comes back? And so that's normal. I guess where we start to look at it might become a bit of an issue is when we get to these higher levels or higher degrees of fears, where it's around moderate to high. The fear of recurrence is on average about 50% of people will report experiencing that, and then an average of 10% experiencing this really high fear of recurrence. So we've got this range from mild to severe. And so, not surprisingly, probably based on these statistics, is that this fear of recurrence is one of the most common unmet needs, meaning that people are wanting help with it and it's not necessarily always available. So some of the research suggests that some people are a bit reluctant to bring it up sometimes at their appointment, or on the flip side, sometimes it's not asked about by your doctors or the health professionals. So it's a sort of this feeling that kind of sits there, but it's not really addressed. And I guess that's part of what we're doing with the Fearless project is to try and address this unmet need as well. And the other interesting thing is that this fear is often not strongly linked with prognosis. So people can have this fear who might be who might have curable disease and low risk of recurrence, and still present really with a really strong fear. In terms of the signs of FCR, so these, so people who experience this fear of cancer recurrence tend to have a strong conviction that the cancer will come back, and this leads to some of the signs that you can see here. So thinking a lot about cancer and finding it really hard to stop thinking about it once you start, being really vigilant to any physical sort of symptoms, or lots of checking and asking for maybe more scans or tests than what you might need or what's been recommended.
Sorry, I'm just going to see who I might need to mute. I think we have some background.
No worries.
Well, it seems to have stopped. I'll keep an eye on it.
Cool, thanks, Danielle. So yeah, the checking, and then there's also the flip side of the checking, which is avoidance. So sometimes we see people not wanting to go to scans and checks because that's where something might be picked up, and that's a scary thought. So that there's this avoidance. And then the impact on day-to-day life. So things like trouble focusing on your relationships or work, or having trouble planning for the future. And then just impacting on your mood as well. So not enjoying life, feeling anxious or down. So these are some of the common signs, and I might just pause here again if anyone was comfortable to share your experiences, whether you've noticed any of these signs yourself.
Yeah, I'll just jump in again. I think I have hypervigilance. So I guess I have hypervigilance, and like if something's wrong, I want to get on top of it really quickly. But then also there's like, I want to prioritize my health so it doesn't reoccur, but I don't really have much guidance on what to change. Like I don't live an unhealthy lifestyle. So, you know, I'm trying to like cut out things that might be unhealthy. So I guess hypervigilant on my health as well.
Yeah. And that's a hard sort of balance to strike. Because like you say, you want to focus on your health and minimize the chance of recurrence. But I guess it's a bit of a spectrum. Then where does it start to become?
Attention staff, the staff flu program is up on level 13. Today is your last day to get a free flu vaccination. Level 13 until 4 o'clock. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Just a flu vax announcement. Anyone else want to jump in with any signs of the fear of recurrence? All right. So I've got here just some personal descriptions of FCR from some other studies. So my favorite one is the first one, fear of cancer recurrences, cancer's ghost that stands beside me, which I really kind of captures that sense of the like a ghost that's sort of just kind of there even after treatment's finished. And there's some quotes here that kind of capture the idea of the trouble thinking about the future, life's stalled, put on hold. And also I guess touching back to the hypervigilance, could be gas pain and it could be cancer. So this interpreting physical symptoms as a potential sign that the cancer's come back. So jumping into risk factors. So according to the research, these are some of the key risk factors for people experiencing fear of cancer recurrence. So typically with younger age, we see higher fear of recurrence, mostly because younger patients tend not to expect a cancer diagnosis, and this can sort of challenge maybe a sense of, I guess, not thinking about mortality. So then this is kind of challenged when a cancer diagnosis happens, and so this can mean that even a low risk of recurrence is seen as quite frightening. People with a history of anxiety or past trauma, gender tends to be a risk factor. So I think female patients tend to have a higher fear of recurrence. And also a big one is the presence of physical symptoms. So people who experience side effects post-treatment tend to experience high levels of fear of recurrence, typically because side effects are a reminder of the cancer and also a potential source of worry in and of itself, as we just went through in the last slide. And so all of these things can impact how much someone is worried about the cancer coming back. And so in terms of triggers, typical triggers for the fear of cancer recurrence popping up is having to go to a follow-up appointment or scan. So typically we see a spike in worry around these times. If there are new or ongoing physical symptoms, as we talked about, sometimes there's an anniversary reaction. So around the dates of diagnosis or surgery date, that can set off some fear and worry. And other times it might be hearing about other people, whether it's in your family or friendship circle, or even a celebrity diagnosis and in the media. So these different stories might pop up and trigger some fear of cancer recurrence in people. So again, pausing here. Does that sound familiar for any of you in terms of when you might experience some of this fear or worry about recurrence?
Probably just physical for me. So
Sorry, what was that, Greg?
physical symptoms for me.
Physical symptoms.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems like a big one.
So yeah, that sort of concerns me a lot. So.
Yeah, which is understandable. It's just, as we said earlier, that reminder that's kind of sits there. Thank you, Greg. Did anyone else feel comfortable to share what their triggers might be?
It's TOOLKIT here. The anniversary reaction is interesting, but also I've had 2 diagnoses subsequently, a year apart, of different cancers in September. So it's a bit bizarre that, but yeah, I'm not looking forward to September.
Yeah. Thanks, Tarquin. It's quite a common thing that once the dates roll around, that fear and anxiety can increase around that time. Anyone else? Move along. So now we'll jump into the toolkit for managing FCR. So before we do that, did anyone have any questions that you'd like to bring up at this point of just about the first half of the talk so far? Okay, great. So in terms of the toolkit, I've got this image here. You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. And I've put that there because I guess the goal of treatment or sort of managing FCR is not necessarily to remove the fear of recurrence entirely. As I said earlier, it's pretty normal and we'd expect to see some level of fear or these thoughts about the potential of the cancer coming back, but it's more about managing it so if these thoughts come up or these worries come up, it doesn't take over or impact your day-to-day life. So a lot of our strategies are based on what's called cognitive behavior therapy or CBT. So in this model, we consider that our feelings are linked to how we behave and how we react, as well as our thoughts. So, and how we think about a situation can then impact our feelings as well. And it becomes a bit of a cycle. And so just to illustrate that for FCR, so we've got this model here. So let's say this is probably quite relevant for the physical sensations. So let's say there's some kind of body sensation, maybe some muscle tension, nausea, shortness of breath, then that might trigger some thoughts such as, oh no, it's back, I'm not going to be able to handle this, what does this mean? Which might lead you to feel anxious, scared, overwhelmed, which then might lead to checking or hypervigilance, or the flip side, which is avoidance. And then when we're anxious and overwhelmed, that can then affect our physical sort of state as well. So then we're more tense, maybe we get a headache, feel sick, and then that feeds back into these thoughts. And so it keeps circling around in a bit of a vicious cycle. So I'll pause here for a second again. Does anyone have any comments or feel comfortable to share your sort of thoughts about whether this resonates with you or not? All right, move along. So I guess for us then, just on the basis of this model, our treatment will then, or our strategies will then try to target different components of the model. So the first sort of, I guess, thing I'll talk about is things you can do in terms of, if we go back to this model, the behavior section. A starting point is talking to your treating team. So what we usually recommend is to try and access the information that you need from your treating team. So whether that's your GP or your oncologist, or any other health professional involved in your care, but sort of asking questions around what are the symptoms I should look out for, what's normal or to be expected post-treatment. If I do notice a symptom, how long should I wait before reaching out to get it checked and getting a scan? If you do need a scan, how long will I have to wait for results? Who do I contact with questions? How do I contact the team? So having, because I guess one of the other thing that I didn't mention earlier was lack of information and uncertainty can definitely drive the worry and fear of recurrence as well. So having as much information as possible so that you kind of have a guideline of what to expect or what you can do can be really helpful. Any thoughts about that one?
Yeah, I'll just jump in. I found when I was like the most anxious was when the if something did go wrong, the treatment was unclear, like what the next steps were. And so when it was like, you know, when I was like, okay, what happens if this happens, and there's like a game plan, that was super comforting.
Yeah, definitely. And I've had a patient in the past who created a folder of everything. So I mean, everyone's different, so your style might be different, but this particular person kept a folder of all these questions and guidelines, and they found that really helpful. So yeah, like you say, having that information and that structure can be quite useful. Yeah, thanks, Paul. Did anyone else want to jump in? Move along. So the other part of, I guess, the behavior corner of the CBT model is looking after yourself and good self-care. So we define this as the intentional time taken on a daily basis to look after yourself through things like maintaining relationships, looking after your health in terms of exercise, diet, sleep, checking with your GP, being aware of your resources and what you can and can't do, so being realistic, and finding what's meaningful to you and trying to do it as frequently as you can. And so these might be things that you are already doing, or they might be things that have dropped off. Sometimes we we do drop off on the self-care for different reasons. So it can be helpful to have a think about what makes up self-care for you, because it might be different for every person, and be intentional about resuming that. So some examples that people generally like to do, got listed there: gardening, making something, playing a game, cooking, getting creative, volunteering. So all of these different things tend to, I guess, provide a distraction from the worry, but it can also help with our mood if we feel like, you know, we're progressing with something, particularly things that like building something where you feel like you can see progress being made. It can be really, really helpful. And other things that are a bit more active sometimes just help us use up any adrenaline from the body, so that it can help calm you down, so that you're able to deal with any issues or concerns that come up. And our recommendation is always to start small. So picking one thing that you like and starting there, or if you know you used to go for a run but find it hard to do that now, then you might start off with a walk and slowly build up and go from there. Yeah, so those are some general activities. I'm just curious about whether you see anything that you enjoy there, or are there other you're curious about what some of your self-care activities might be, if you're comfortable to share.
When I got my diagnosis 3 years ago, I took up cycling because I'd read that it's useful to have exercise where for at least 15 minutes a day you perspire. So I enjoyed cycling, and I started doing that and continue to do so.
Oh, so had you ever cycled before that, Andrew?
Not for 40 years, no.
No, okay. So you sort of restarted something.
Yeah.
After that time, yeah. And I'm glad to hear you're still doing it as well. That's great. Thank you, Andrew. Anyone else feel comfortable to?
I walk daily, so yeah, just good. So
yeah, definitely.
Good half an hour to 40 minutes daily. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So good for my body and mentally as well. So
definitely, all those physical activities really helpful. Just get the body moving, but just you say mentally just helps the mood as well. Yeah, thank you, Greg. Anyone else?
Yeah, I also try to go for a walk daily. And then, as I'm recovering, I'm able to increase that. So just slowly stepping it up. Yeah,
definitely. Just coming back to what I was saying earlier about starting small, and definitely aligning with what is recommended by your treating team as well. Thanks, Paul. Anyone else before I move on? So now we'll jump into the managing your worry portion. So it's more about the thoughts corner of that CBT model from earlier. So this particular strategy works really well for some people, where we, I guess, put into place the idea of creating a worry time. So if you find that you tend to think about the fear of occurrence throughout the day and it's hard to control, then we're trying to create a bit of a time for those thoughts, so that outside of that time, you're putting your energy or your thoughts into the other things that you're doing throughout the day. So the starting point is to choose a specific time, place and length of time for worrying each day. So for example, at 6 p.m. in my living room for 20 minutes. And we usually say don't go longer than 20 minutes, and always at least 2 hours before bedtime, so it doesn't bleed into your bedtime. And then, as I said, then throughout the day, the idea is that you delay your worry. So when you notice a worry pop up during the day, you might jot it down somewhere on your phone or on a piece of paper, and then remind yourself that you will deal with that worry during the worry time, and then focusing on the other things that you want to be doing during the day. And then during the worry time, that's the time when you might come back to your worries and you might think about the things that you had written down. But I guess the guide here is that only if they're still bothering you. So if by the time worry time comes around and those niggling thoughts that you had throughout the day aren't really bothering you anymore, then we would say don't think about it. So let it be and just don't do the worry time. And the final step then is, with some of these worries, if there's something that you might be able to do about it, then an option might be doing some problem solving. So brainstorming some options, choosing the best option, and then setting up the steps for this option. So I guess it's a way of trying to get your brain to be thinking along sort of more practical steps, because the worry that comes with fear of recurrence can be quite nebulous, in the sense that these tend to be what if questions. So what if it comes back? What will happen then? They're very what's the word? It's very uncertain, and we don't have the answers to those questions. So if we can make it more concrete again, like I will check with my doctor when I see him at my appointment next week, or I will call the clinic and make an appointment tomorrow, or something like that. It gives you a more concrete kind of focus and plan for those worries, if that makes sense. So I'll pause here again if anyone has any questions about this particular strategy, or maybe any comments whether you've tried something like this before.
Yes, I have this is Paul in St Kilda. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Yes, I can. Hi, Paul.
Hi there. This is it's not exactly on the same topic, your main topic, though it is related.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I'm as a result of the treatment, and also as a result of my myeloma, I'm immunocompromised.
Mm-hmm.
I had 4 COVID injections, 4 COVID vaccinations so far, in line for a 5th soon. So I guess I don't know if you call it worry, but concern is the fact that of potentially getting this horrible, life-threatening infection, COVID, and the fact that it's invisible and that it's seen everywhere, and 99% of the population doesn't care. It seems, and it's just carrying on as usual. So that's, and I take the precautions that I can, but it's quite restrictive on lifestyle, and that's a sort of secondary part of it. The fact of not being able to do lots of things, not being able to eat indoors in restaurants, not being able to go in an airplane, not even be able to get away from the cold in Melbourne and go north to go somewhere warmer, and certainly not for the last 3 years to go and visit family in Europe. And I really wonder, when will I ever be able to see my family again in person? So I'm sorry if it's a bit off topic, but
no problem.
Just wonder if you have any thoughts on that aspect of worry.
Yeah, it's really, really tough. It's definitely, I guess, sometimes I think of worry as our brain's way of trying to problem solve. So I sometimes like to think of the brain as a problem solving machine. And so when we come across these different issues, it tries to think of ways to deal with the problem. And in your case, Paul, it sounds like, you know, like you said, you're trying to do these specific actions to keep yourself safe. But at the same time, like you say, it's quite restrictive. And that can be a common issue that we see, is in the weighing up of this worry and these steps, and how much is it restricting my restricting my life, or, you know, whether I can do these things or that are meaningful to me, like you say, like visiting family and enjoying a meal. So that is not uncommon to see that that happen. And I guess in general, we would then I guess try to weigh up for you, because it might be different for everyone in terms of weighing up those two sides. If that makes sense. I'm not sure if I answered your question, Paul.
Yes, I mean, part of it, the difficulty is the lack of medical understanding of this particular virus and its effects on different people, which seems to vary enormously from person to person, whether they are or they aren't immunocompromised. And I've talked to my specialists, and also, in fact, I was at the Royal Melbourne this morning, and I asked a medical professional there. He said, "I'm sorry, we just don't know. I can't tell you one thing or another, whether it's safe to do one thing. It might be, or it might not be." Yeah, it is. It's a concern. And I guess I don't know whether I'd say it's so much as a worry, as more of a real sort of deflating or dispiriting situation to have this continuing. I'm sure we all remember when lockdown was on. Well, this is like ongoing lockdown for a small proportion of the population. But without most people being even aware of it.
Paul, do you have? Sorry, Paul, do you have friends that you talk to about this, and family, or, you know, does your men's shed or your prostate cancer support, your cancer support groups, you know, do they have people that you can talk to, or do you want, you know, would it be any benefit to have someone that you haven't met before just talk to you in general about things because you can't get out?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, my partner, she's not a cancer patient, but because she lives with me, and therefore she could be a vector for infection, she's subject to the same restrictions, and so we gripe and moan about it. In fact, laughingly, we say that for us, Australia, beautiful, we love the country. It's become a prison colony again. It's like the gilded cage, you know, beautiful lifestyle. It's the golden cage. Yeah.
Hey, Paul, it's Paul here too. I don't really have any advice or anything, but just, you know, I was in the same situation as you were for a good 8 months, where I was on the mop-up chemo and also have the 4 COVID shots. And yeah, I can just relate how much you feel like, I guess, you're missing out, where, you know, 99% of the population is living life as normal, and you got to prioritize your health and the restrictions that come with it. And yeah, just how challenging that can be.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's also, you know, it's winter, it's cold, it's grey, it's very cold at home. So there's a number of sort of things that compounding that normally don't, each one in of itself doesn't seem too intolerable, but it's just sort of compounding all these different things. Anyway, I don't want to hog too much airtime here, but I just thought I'd put this out there, so to speak.
Paul, I'm just suggesting that if you would like to have a chat with someone, you know, not on a psychological basis, not on the basis of this particular issue, but just somebody that you've not spoken with before, to shoot the breeze, I'd be more than happy to talk to you.
Okay, Andrew. Well, I'll shoot an email to the person at the Wellness Centre who organises the men's shed. No doubt they'll put us in touch.
Yeah, Paul, I can, I'll follow up with both you and Andrew after the session and connect you both. That's no problem at all.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks, Paul, for for your input. It's definitely a really tough situation to be in. And yeah, thank you, Andrew, for your offer of support as well. That's really nice to see. And I guess with these kinds of worries, especially when there's so much uncertainty, which applies to this fear of recurrence, but I guess also just in general, that when things are uncertain is when we notice worry tends to pop up more. And again, going back to that surfing the wave idea, I suppose we're not aiming to get rid of worry entirely, because it's part of how we sort of process things. And like I said earlier, I sometimes think of it as the way our brain tries to problem solve things. So so it's more, I guess, trying to how do I say, use it in the most helpful way that we can, sort of using this as part of the way our brains work to try and come up to the best solution possible for the situation, which might change over time as well. And the other thing, I guess, going back to then the self-care is as best you can, doing the things that are meaningful to you, that do bring some fulfillment or joy, that can at least help day to day. Did anyone else have any other questions or comments on this particular slide?
Hi there, it's MacCallum. I just, when I was first diagnosed, one of the psychs that I worked with put me onto an app called Worry Time, which you really can write your worries down and set that 20 minutes. So if you're into that sort of stuff, I must admit that I did it a couple of times, then forgot. Because I didn't like to be worrying about worries, whether or not I've worried enough or put the right worry in the right time. But it is probably good for some people who want to work that way. Yeah,
thanks, MacCallum. Yeah, absolutely. With, I guess, with all of these strategies that I go through today, I mean, I guess it's about building your personal toolkit. So some of these things that I talk about might sound really helpful and useful for you, or interesting for you to try, but others you might be thinking, oh, that's not for me, which is perfectly fine. It's finding the right mix for you. Right. So the next slide is also about the thinking corner of the CBT model. So for this one, so these I've just listed here, helpful questions to ask about your thinking. So sometimes when we're worrying, our thinking can become a little bit exaggerated or distorted, in the sense of jumping to conclusions, for example. And this usually comes from the tendency for all of us to, I guess, create mental shortcuts or thinking shortcuts. So, for example, if I said to you that I'm going to a birthday, then you're probably thinking you've got cake, candles, presents. So there's like a framework there. So this helps us to think about things more quickly day to day. But sometimes that means that we end up jumping to conclusions about things that might not be the case. So for just coming back to the fear of recurrence, an example might be if you've got a headache, then if the first thought is the cancer is spread to my brain, for example, I'm going to need more surgery, then sometimes it can be helpful to, I guess, ask ourselves some questions just to, like I said, there, be a detective about your thinking. Am I jumping to conclusions? Am I paying attention only to the dark side of things? So with that example, the other thing might be, I was dehydrated today, I didn't drink enough water. That's why I've got a headache, or something like that. So kind of asking, could there be some other explanation for what's going on? So sometimes that just helps us to balance out the where the worry is going. So this can be another tool for trying to manage worry. Again, if I just pause here for a moment, any questions about this particular strategy or any thoughts? Maybe you've tried it before. And then, so reaching the end of our toolkit for today, this next one about acceptance is, again, comes back to that wave, surfing the wave that I mentioned earlier, that we will have various thoughts and feelings crop up throughout the day. Some of them are more pleasant than others, and to accept that this is happening right now, but this anxiety will pass. So trying not to judge or get caught up in that feeling. So what can happen is it becomes a bit like an onion. So if you're anxious and then getting anxious about being anxious, these layers keep building up. So so what can be really helpful is thinking about your thoughts and feelings like clouds in the sky, or so if you want to give it a go now, it might be if you close your eyes and just notice what thoughts or feelings are coming up for you. So you might consider experiencing your thoughts and feelings like clouds passing you by in the sky. So clouds are part of the Earth's weather system, and it'd be impossible to try and control them. So if you're trying to treat your thoughts and feelings like passing clouds, you might allow that thought some space and then letting it pass you by. Another image that might be really helpful is, again, if you like, you can close your eyes and sort of imagine or think of yourself as a passenger waiting for a train at a station. So your mind or your brain is like a busy train station, and your thoughts and feelings are the trains passing through. So there's no point in trying to stop and jump aboard a train that's passing by. So imagine you're just a bystander on the platform, watching your thoughts pass through. So that can sometimes be a useful kind of mental image to help with letting thoughts pass and not getting caught up in them. So a related idea is mindfulness. So this is something you might have heard of before. So this mindfulness in the research means being aware of the present moment, so what's happening now, by observing and focusing completely on one thing at a time without judgment. And so that might mean being aware of your thoughts, emotions, or body sensations without judging or trying to control them. So when we're thinking about that headache I mentioned earlier, the earlier example, it might be noticing that there is this sensation here without that judgment of, oh no, it's come back.
Hello, darling.
So I guess it does take a bit of training to develop the ability to be accepting of thoughts and feelings and practice mindfulness, but it can be developed over time. So usually the way we do this is by paying attention to one thing at a time. So usually it's our breathing in the exercises, but it can be other things. And this tends to help people to step back and process your experience without getting caught up in them. And so I've written here a couple of links to different resources. So the first one, I think, has more sort of intensive courses if you were interested in having a look at that. And Smiling Mind is more of an app that you can download and try some of these mindfulness exercises for yourself as well. There is a lot of research about the benefits of mindfulness in cancer as well, and it's definitely something that can really help with fear of recurrence, to not get swept up, like I said, in the wave, but helps you to surf that wave. Any questions there, or any comments there, or anyone want to share your experiences with practicing mindfulness or acceptance? Okay. And then so I'll just finish off with this quote here. The diagnosis of cancer and its treatment creates a sense of urgency about time that goes along with the uncertainty it causes. A person who can say, I'm just going to take it one day at a time, is able to stay focused on the tasks of that day. The person who hardly enjoys today because of concerns and worries about tomorrow has a much harder time dealing with illness. As hard as it is to keep thinking that way, coping with cancer is easier if you try not to focus on all the challenges that may lie ahead, but stay focused on today. So that's from Holland in 2000, and I guess it does just summarize everything we've talked about today, and just taking things a step at a time, focusing on the moment with the self-care, and trying not to get caught up in the worry and the anxiety as best that you can. But that when it's there, knowing that it will pass in time as well. In the final slide, it's just some resources. So we've got the Cancer Mind Care website, which you might have come across before. So this is where you can create, I guess, a personalized mental health plan with different topics. So it also includes fear of recurrence, anxiety, sleep, fatigue. So it has lots of different topics that might be of interest as well. Attending a support group like the men shared here today, or got a website here which has a list of different options. If you're needing more sort of individual or one-on-one support, it might be helpful to see your GP or oncologist and seek a referral to a psychologist or counsellor. And I've got a website for that here as well. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, we have the Fearless program at Peter Max. So that's we've in the process of developing we have developed a booklet, and in the process of translating that to other languages. So hopefully that will be ready soon to distribute as well. That's pretty much it from me. I guess we can open up to any questions, or if anyone has anything they'd like to add at the end as well.